And good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brittany Hall. I am Education and Training Coordinator for the National Park Service, Chesapeake Gateways Office. I want to thank you all, our Visitor Experience Network, for joining us today to talk about creating welcoming spaces for African American visitors. And we'll be hearing from two sort of experts in the field. Just a reminder that we are recording the call. Um, Sorry, I'm still getting notifications as folks are coming in.
I'm taking care of those, Brittany, so you can
Okay.
keep going.
Yeah, it just comes up on my screen. I'd like to talk a little bit about NPS Chesapeake Gateways. Just a reminder that you can join our Visitor Experience Network. We'll let you know a little bit about that at the end of the webinar. If you would like to be an official part of, or unofficial, a sort of recognized member of our Chesapeake Gateways. If you have a site, we can talk about having you listed on our website, nps.gov/Chesapeake, and many of the benefits that come with being a part of the network. As we prepare to dive into really important conversation today about welcoming African American visitors, I'd like to first set some sort of shared agreements within the group. If we could move to slide 2, please. There are some communication guidelines for creating brave spaces that were developed by Aware LA. So we are taking some of the best practices known for creating, spaces where folks feel welcome to communicate, and that includes you all. So there's lots of different um, sort of best practices, and Brent, you can keep clicking to add all of them onto the screen. Of course, welcome multiple viewpoints. We understand that everyone is speaking from their own experiences, so it's recommended that we use I statements. Please own your intentions as well as your impact. We all know that we're coming to this space to learn together. And it's important to respect each other's experiences by taking responsibility of how something you may say could affect others. I'd also invite you to work to recognize your own privileges. No one's perfect here. So just be open to learning from this experience. Take risks, do lean in to your discomfort, challenge yourself to contribute, even if it's not a perfectly formulated idea. And then also, let's remember to share the space. We're going to step up, we're going to step back, allow others to, also share their experiences. And that's the benefit of being in a network, right? Page 2, please. A few more of our shared rules for creating a brave space, not just a safe space, but also a brave space, is to notice and name group dynamics in the moment. If we're feeling uncomfortable, you are welcome to send a private chat to myself, to my colleague and supervisor, Brent Everett, who is graciously taking care of the behind the scenes tech. We also have our interpretive planner here, Ms. Corey Munson, and as well as Evelyn, our Chesapeake Gateways ambassador. You are welcome to identify any of those people. If you check up in the top of your screen, there is a people sort of option, and you can identify any of those folks if you would like to have a private conversation. Also, if you would just like a timeout or to step away, you are welcome to do so. I know you're all willing to listen and learn, so I think number 7 is quite obvious. actively listen to folks and share your thoughts. As we do notice and name group dynamics, please also challenge with care, understanding again how your how what you might say could impact others. Understand that this this meeting is recorded and will be shared on YouTube, on the MPS Chesapeake YouTube. So if you would like to have any kind of confidential conversations, again, you can message one of our MPS Chesapeake folks. And then break it down. So use some simple language that we can all access when you want to clarify or get clarification. So this network chat is very similar to all of our network chats in that we welcome an opportunity to meet folks in the field that are doing similar work to you and are all tied and connected to the Chesapeake. So with that, I'm actually going to pass it on to our speakers for today. We have two amazing people who are going to talk about their experience in the African-American, with African-American marketing and for sort of tourism and experiences in the various places that they work within the watershed. With that, I am going to actually pass it on so that you all can introduce yourselves and speak from your own voice. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Brittany. I'm Tameka Jefferson, and I am the Community Relations Manager for Richmond Region Tourism. Here, I manage our DEI programs. We have Out RVA, which is an LGBTQ campaign now initiative that launched. It'll be 10 years in September. And then, of course, Black RVA, which is what I'll be speaking with you all today about, which launched August of 2019. I'm in the midst of planning a first ever community celebration for the 50th anniversary, and it's going to be an award ceremony because both campaigns are heavily involved in community, from their voices to advisory committees, and also just celebrating and making sure they are aware of the huge impact tourism has, and also our businesses, just kind of honoring our businesses and tour operators who keep this campaign afloat. So we will be celebrating that in August, Black Business Month this year. So I'll stop there so that Ashley can intro herself.
Well, hello, everyone. I am Ashley Hill. I have the pleasure of working with Sojourn Noir as their consultant of cultural intelligence. And Sojourn Noir specifically focuses on African-American leisure tourism. So whether that is retail therapy, whether that is your dining experience, whether you are outside having an adventure or resting, we want to make sure that African Americans are having the optimal experience that they should be having during their leisure, that they feel respected, that they feel like they have a sense of belonging, and that they feel welcomed. So that's the work that we do on that side. And we do it in two ways, and I'll be unpacking the ways in which we facilitate those, both with African Americans and representing their needs, and also coaching, training, and supporting businesses and organizations in order to facilitate those those spaces of belonging. So I'm happy to be here, and thank you so much, Corey, for the invite.
All right, so I told you, so Black RVA launched August of 2019. It really precedes me, but I started 2 weeks before the pandemic. So imagine how that was for me, entering tourism and also managing a community-focused campaign from a virtual space. But we were very successful, and I'll talk about that later. But we recently, through our foundation, because Black RVA is under the Richmond Region Tourism Foundation, and so we're able to raise money to give back 100% to the programming. But we work with a corporate partner here to update our mission. Originally launched to increase African-American tourism, to ensure that we're allowing the Black voices of our event planners and their events, our businesses, kind of be seen to visitors and residents alike. Of course, when Black RVA launched, it was simply just supposed to be just an online directory of what do I do when I get there and how can I activate and engage with locals. But we wanted to elevate that, and it has since elevated to something much more than that. Me specifically working directly with Black-owned businesses, because with our advisory members being so closely connected and telling us what we should do because they're in community. They said you can invite 1 million people to your house, but if you don't have the food to feed those individuals, then why are we doing this in the first place, right? And so although we are a marketing organization and our goal is to market the region, we want to make sure that we are serving as conveners in spaces where others in these businesses cannot be. And so that means connecting with organizations who are on the ground to help build capacity, making sure we're providing sponsorship opportunity for events and other programming and things that they may need to stay open and afloat. And that really came out of, being impacted by COVID and other things, of course, historic resources and lack thereof for Black-owned businesses. So you see here our mission truly changed to be a more diverse and inclusive space, and to how we connect to locals to enjoy what they have in their own backyard. So you can go to the next slide. This is the original action team or committee. So it started with our Katen O'Donnell here. She is going to be the next CEO and president of Richmond Region Tourism starting in June. But she connected with Anjali Moon, who is to her right. She said, hey, we do a good job, and we have been doing a good job at Richmond Region Tourism promoting everyone, the entire region. But because of the history that we have here in the city of Richmond, we realized that there are a lot of historic things that need to be elevated and a lot of spaces that need to be elevated. And, we looking at the market and kind of seeing what the data is showing, that there are a lot of African-American travelers who are really traveling for either leisure or history. And so how do we reach those individuals and say, although we have the history of what we have here as being the capital of the Confederacy, we are resilient and we have a lot of other things that we need to showcase and spaces to do that. So we couldn't create a campaign at the time, a Campaign Now program. We couldn't create that without being connected to the individuals who know more about it, who live in it, who are business owners. And that's what we did. Also hiring a Black-owned, small women-owned marketing and branding firm to kind of manage that so that the vocal voice is what you see when you reach out to the website. So this was at the launch right here. You can go to the next slide. So that is a quick marketing video that was made to kind of highlight Black RVA is set up on 4 pillars: arts and entertainment, food and drink, history, and community. And that is how we promote our businesses and our event planners that fall under that space, who are hospitality and tourism organizations or businesses. And you can go to the next slide, please. This is the website. If you were to go to Visit BLK RVA, it is an online directory, but also you will see features of rooted and rising businesses, business owners and businesses that have been around for forever here, and then those who are rising up every single day. I know last year in 2023, Richmond, according to Yelp, had 66% increase in Black-owned businesses. And so we want to make sure we feature those business owners. We also have a Black RVA newsletter that comes out quarterly so that our residents are aware of new businesses, events, and how to engage and support. You truly can just plan a trip, grab a bite, catch a vibe, or go to events that are happening here in our region. And our website, you can go to the next slide. We also have, social media. We have Facebook and Instagram, where we have more than 15,000 followers. We engage there the most because there are people who are following us for giveaways. We work with our local Altria Theater. So when there's a concert coming to town or a celebrity coming to host the show like Cat Williams or Kevin Hart and others, we do giveaways all the time, or gospel concerts. We're always doing giveaways either to the artists because we want the artists to be welcome, but also to the residents so we can make sure they get out, engage. And sometimes it includes gift cards to local restaurants as well. Next slide, please. When I talked about COVID and how we were impacted, of course, people weren't traveling. So we were intentional about making sure that our residents got out and experienced and engaged. And so we started first a history campaign around February that talked about the historic neighborhoods in our city. One being Jackson Ward, considered the Harlem of the South, with Magdalena Walker. Many of you know Magdalena Walker being the first African-American female who chartered a bank. And so we do have also the convention center where I'm located, but they're in our own backyard down here in the heart of Jackson Ward. And so we highlighted that with some giveaways. If you stop by those locations, there are some videos on our website, and we keep those series up right now, just in some specialized Rooted and Rising merchandise that we were able to sell during that time to give back to our organizations and our businesses, our nonprofit organizations. Next slide. This is the food and drink campaign. And so we did specialized T-shirts and gave it to restaurants who wanted to sign up and be a part of it. And we encourage residents, hey, go by this restaurant. You'll get a specialized Black RVA item, food item, and also merchandise, and you will get discounts also. We paid to have discounts all, and this was no expense at all on the businesses that were participated. We paid all expense paid of all of these things, and we're able to do that again because it's under our foundation, and we're able to raise money that goes 100% back to programming. And we participated with 9 local businesses during that time. Next slide, please. This was the arts and entertainment campaign. There was a selfie museum we had here. And so we actually, this is a screenshot to the right of the selfie museum at the time, one of their sections. They created a Black RVA themed museum where we had merchandise in there. We had local musicians, like Billboard Jangles, all the way up to local DJs. Their artists was able to come in and sound on the wall. And so it really talked about the trajectory of our people in the creative space, artists and entertainers were able to be highlighted in that selfie booth. And then we have festivals like the Africana Film Festival or the Down Home Family Union. Those are organizations who are always putting on events, again, giving free entree, giving free tickets away to residents to encourage them to go out, or specialized items at their events. And all of these events that we have that is Black-centered events, Black RVA usually sponsored by way of a cash sponsorship. And we're able to set up a table to engage residents during that time. Next slide. This is one more video, and what we did, this was last year's series. We talked about, if you go on the website, you see how there are blog posts from local business owners, from residents. Really, it's truly an open space. We want the visitor to see, you know, not just what we're presenting, but hearing it firsthand from those who live here. And so we created a series called How I Live Black RVA. So this is a local artist. I have a few others of business owners here to talk, but I wanted to highlight this one because this was the first one that we did. If you can click on that, please. All right, so this is what we're doing right now. This actually closes tomorrow. So we launched one of the concerns that came out of our outreach. So I have an intern that starts every summer. And one of the issues we have is, which makes sense, Black RVA, a lot of businesses, they get emails all the time from me. They know my name, but they don't have time to respond, or they're not engaging. Or if you go to our listings, they have old pictures on our website, or some of them are not even there when I know we've made connections. And so we have a Black RVA intern who go to the door. We meet them where they are. So they go to their place and say, hey, here's a gift bag from Black RVA. We are 100% free to you. We want to make sure you know that we are a resource for you and for visitors to find you. So we need you to go to the website and update your listing. But in doing that, we realized that they need photos. And unfortunately, some of them don't have the funding to do that. And so we were able to provide this sponsorship. We're in the stage of looking for 20 businesses to give them 3 to 5 images for their website that will be on for us to continue to promote the region, but also they have full access to those photos as well. And then the next step after this will be to put out an RFP to find a Black-owned photographer who are willing to get the money to do the work. And so I'm looking for up to 2 Black-owned photographers to kind of do the work there. And so again, 100% free to the business that is involved, because we realize, you know, there are times you can promote all day, but you have to kind of show up in spaces where they need it most. So next slide, please. And this is just a picture of us out at events. The one on the left was the Juneteenth Festival when it launched a few years ago. We're doing it again this June. But this to the right is some of the members, and this was long before I started, but they were out just kind of engaging and making sure we're in as many spaces and places as possible to share the message. Because again, when people aren't traveling, we need the residents to be engaged and to know about this, and then they can become tourism ambassadors to share the message to their family and friends or associates or meeting and tour operators that come here to host events. Next slide, please. merchandise. And so this is always on our website, an opportunity for people to get shirts. I mean, every time I'm in the region, people are always like, oh, how do I get a t-shirt? And so we do it for giveaways. We do it for people, volunteers. We have a program under Richmond Region Tourism Foundation where our residents can become tourism ambassadors. It's a free class that we host every month to talk about what there is to do in our 7 jurisdictions that we promote. Once they graduate, they get an attraction pass that allows them free entry or discounted entry to local museums, not only just Black History museums, but really all of our museums and King's Dominion theme parks. So just so they can experience it for themselves and then go out and talk about it. And we're able to encourage residents to go purchase. All funds usually go back to nonprofit or go back to programming for BLK RVA. And then the next slide is the last slide. And so I just wanted to put my information here. If you all have any questions, or I'm happy to speak to anybody. I'll tell you this, in the past, we talked to places like Charlottesville before they launched their Black Seville campaign. And then I think it was Raleigh as well. So people in the industry oftentimes want to know, how do you all get started? And I would like to take a moment and brag that before the George Floyd, before the Breonna Taylor, this was really in discussion for about 2 years before it launched, August 2019, because of course, Richmond saw the need super long ago. And I'm glad that we were able to do something like this. And then of course, when everything hit, we just continue to get better and better as the years and the months go on. And I'll stop there. Thank you. You could just end the slide, please. Are there any questions, comments? I will say this, because I don't want it to all look peaches and cream. You know, when you're dealing with something as sensitive as this space, it is not always easy. It is not always fun. It's very challenging, but I appreciate the opportunity to have the community to hold us accountable, where we're able to be transparent and where we're truly able to make sure it's authentic and to the voice of community. So I think I wanted to make sure I say that.
Thank you so much, Tameka. Ashley, do her part, and then we'll open it up for discussion. How about that?
So yes, thank you so much again for the invite to have this conversation about Sojourn Noir. It is one of the things that keeps me up at night with excitement about this project, about this program, and about this opportunity. And so when we talk about leisure and African-American travelers and African-American, African-American seeking leisure, we talk about it as an inalienable right, right? We know we have those rights to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, but they were not always extended to African-Americans, obviously, and they can still be subject to question and threat, right? Those inalienable rights to life, leisure, and happiness, and just Black joy, right? And so when we think about this, we think about it as a right, and that's how we move forward in the work. A little bit about me. I have been in human development for a long time. About 20 years, which makes me 21, obviously. But yeah, I've been in organizational health for a long time. The idea of, making sure that workplaces and workspaces are safe, that everyone feels seen and heard. That has been my life's work, whether it's working with youth or whether it is working with young adults or adults in their workspaces. So I do love the work of creating safe, emotional spaces, and it has been a life's joy. And I also want to say, I want to put out there that I'm a dog lover. We go on lots of hikes. I'm a recipe enthusiast. That happened during the pandemic, and I hate capers. And I like to tell everyone that I meet that I do not like capers on my food. Drop in the chat a food that you hate and we can bond, but capers are a no for me. And just a fun fact. A little bit about what drives us, and since I've been involved with Sojourn Noir as their cultural intelligence consultant, I'm always in this kind of frame of mind of thinking about spaces that I'm in, because we're in a lot of like leisure spaces, right? So when I'm hiking with my dog, or when I'm at Panera, something as commonplace, right? And very bland as like just being in a Panera and working on my laptop. Because I'm in this work, I'm constantly thinking about like to be here and have this kind of like mundane grilled cheese, right? Someone had to fight for that. For me to like sit in this booth, order the food, be waited on. Someone had to fight for me to do that, to access that leisure. When I'm hiking with my dog, like I was yesterday, it just popped into my head, like I'm not in a certain part of the park. I'm in all of the park, right? And what we know for sure is, before 1964, the Civil Rights Act, that wasn't so. And even so, it was very gradual that those spaces opened up. But I would have been in a part of the park that was dilapidated and not well taken care of. No benches, for African Americans, right? No safe spaces in the great outdoors. So I'm always thinking about what it took to get these spaces that I inherit now. And that's just, part of being part of this Sojourn Noir mission. So our mission is to inspire Black people to engage in the inalienable right to travel and to leisure spaces, because it is a right that we had to fight for. And it is a right that we want to make sure that all Black people have access to, and they feel respected and welcome and a sense of belonging when they get there. The vision, the grand vision, is that, millions of Black folks, right, will be taking part in leisure travel where they really feel excited to be in that space, invited to be in that space, welcomed. That is the whole vision, is that not only are we spending our billions of dollars to travel, to be in these leisure spaces, but we also feel like we're getting our money's worth in how we are treated. And then the goal, beginning, first with York City with this work, but now in York County, Pennsylvania, to attract Black travelers to destinations that are poised to provide those welcoming and respectful experiences. And if they aren't poised to provide them, to be able to coach and train and support them in becoming that space. So some data that drives us, and there's a lot of data that drives us, but this is not a data presentation. If you want one, we can give you one. But just a quick snippet, Black people spend a lot of money on travel, on leisure. And oftentimes what comes back is when Black folks go on vacation, they stay longer. They will choose the hotel or hospitality space that cost more, around $250 plus. They will spend more on food, right? So when we say, we outside, we are really outside spending the money, right? And so for us, yeah, that's wonderful, right? We want millions of Black folks experiencing leisure. But then when we look at the statistic that really drives what we're doing, almost half of Black folks are putting forward that they felt unwelcome in a destination that they visited, right? And so for us to be pouring so much money into these spaces, and nearly half of us are saying that we have felt unwelcome or unwanted in a space, that's just not something that Sojourn Noir is going to continue watch happen, right? We want to be part of the conversation and part of the undoing of that narrative. So who drives this work? Joanne Wilmore. She is the owner and operator of Grace Manor Bed and Breakfast in York City, PA. The first Black and woman-owned bed and breakfast in South Central PA. If you haven't been, you should go. The food is delicious. And York is also home to a historic Underground Railroad site, the Goodrich Center. So there's much to do, much to see. And in, the reason that she, got interested in the work, the Sojourn Noir work that she is driving, is from the space of creating Grace Manor. She was inspired by the matriarchs in her life who did not have rest, who did not have leisure, who did not have these spaces, to just be. And so she created Grace Manor. It's named after one of the matriarchs in her family, and dedicated, her life's work to creating spaces of leisure and rest and peace, right, for everyone, and especially for those descendants of the mid-Atlantic slave trade, the transatlantic slave trade, that did not have rest, right? And so the descendants of those who were denied rest, she wants to make sure that they have a place where they can be seen, heard, and safe in her space. The rest of our team on marketing and communications, the fabulous Elaine Banal, and keeping our projects afloat, Carolyn Butera. So a little bit about our methods and how we do what we do. We think about it in three ways. So using marketing strategies, right, like direct outreach and community engagement to depict truthful content from where we are. So whether that is York City or York County, highlighting those experiences that we have researched that Black travelers are interested in, right? And those spaces where Black people have put forward and that these businesses have really done the work to make sure that they are spaces that are welcoming, respectful, and offering a sense of belonging, right? And so for us, similar to the fabulous presentation you just heard, our spaces include, our focus is, of course, outdoor adventure, history and heritage, which is always an underscore for many Black people as they travel, arts and entertainment, retail spaces, dining, and of course, rest and relaxation. There is a huge research component to what we do. So as we work with York City and now York County, we want to know, what is needed, right? What are the strengths? What are the opportunities? What do we have to provide that Black people will be interested in, right? That they will be drawn toward? What are the optimal experiences that this city, this county, this state can provide? And so we do our own proprietary research, which is pretty awesome because oftentimes you don't have a drill down of, your smaller cities or counties of, what you have to offer, what is interesting, how many, Black tourists are actually coming to these venues. So that is very important data as you think about, how you want to get into this work of creating safe spaces. And one of the things that I'll be talking mostly about today is, of course, our Bring Yourself Here learning series. And this is an opportunity for businesses and organizations to create space for learning, right? So if you want to be a space where you are poised to provide that experience of welcoming and respect and a sense of belonging for African Americans, and you really want to do that pointed work and have these conversations with you, with your staff, that is really a huge undertaking that Sojourn Noir has taken on for Bring Yourself Here learning series. And it's a lot of what I'll be talking about. So at a glance, just quickly, what we do for Black travelers, we center their needs for rest, for leisure, for adventure. We amplify their voices to businesses, local businesses and organizations. And we, again, center their sense of belonging. So amplifying their needs and also communicating those needs to businesses and organizations. So for businesses and organizations in York, PA, and beyond, we want to highlight the needs of African American tourists, right? And if there is a gap, right, in understanding We want to be able to fill that gap. And also, if there is a gap in being able to create those spaces, we want to be able to coach, train, and support businesses and organizations in order to provide those spaces. And again, as is my favorite thing, facilitate our hospitality and tourism industry professional development opportunity, which is bring yourself here. So bring yourself here is a learning series that really brings in our hospitality, tourism, business organizations to have the critical conversations that we need in order to create safe spaces for the African American tourist. So what it looks like is there are 6 foundational conversations that we host. Excuse me, I'm sorry. There's one 6-hour foundational conversation that we host that sets the landscape for the conversations that we need to have. You know, if we are a country that has historically denied rest and leisure, right, to the African American traveler, right, we want to know how we unpack that behavior, that thinking, right? Because as we flash forward into being able to think differently and engage differently, we need to be having these critical conversations. But then we don't want you to just have a general conversation. We also want to have conversations that are focused on your area of interest, right? So if you are an owner of a restaurant, we want to have conversations about dining while Black, right? And we want to have those conversations as focused on the area of work that you do. So whether that is in the space of dining, whether that is in the space of outdoor adventure, or whether that is in another space of like rest and respite, having those critical conversations of what it is like to create safe, affirming spaces for Black people, specifically in those areas, are those conversations that we host. And then we have a 90-minute asynchronous conversation. And that is for organizations, like say you're not ready to have these conversations just yet, but you want to assess where your organization is in thinking about serving African-American tourists and travelers. We want you to be able to assess as an organization where you are in your connection to those conversations. Looking at time. So our goal for the Bring Yourself Here learning series, and we have 3. When you leave these conversations, our hope is that you're able to better engage with African American travelers informed by principles of unconditional positive regard. And so I'm going to take a little sip of water. Wet my whistle. Thank you. A little self-care. Unconditional positive regard is a humanistic psychology framework from the 1950s. It's Kahrl Rogers. And the idea is that you are seeing a person for who they are without isms, without holding on to past things, right? And you're able to kind of explore and excavate any isms or bigotries that you might have, right, when engaging with another person. So one of our goals is that you're able to leave this training with an understanding of unconditional positive regard and be able to enact it when engaging with all people and your African American travelers especially, right? And our second one is to foster leisure environments that inspire a sense of respect, welcoming, and belonging for African American patrons. So, you know, if you are a restaurant, if you are a hotel, if you are a historic site, what does it look like to host this space, right, in a way that African Americans feel safe, feel appreciated, and feel welcome? And finally, you'll be able to transform your culturally informed tactics into process and protocol, right? We've all been to Chick-fil-A, right? And it's my pleasure, right? So the idea is that just naturally there are things that we can turn that might just be like random tactics right now, that are process and protocol that elevate the experience for your Black patrons that you can naturally do to create those senses of welcoming and belonging. And, you know, our why of this work, going back to the conversation I had about, you know, sitting in spaces and knowing that we had to earn them and had to fight for them, are these kind of iconic moments from history. You might know some of these pictures very well, and many of them are from leisure spaces and outdoor spaces. So this is Mamie Ford. It's the 1964 picture that actually was a huge like push forward for the Civil Rights Act, and it was you know, Black students in a hotel pool, and acid was being poured on them as they were attempting to swim. And this was considered a wade-in, so they were doing it in order to open up pools for African American patrons. Another historic photo you might know, which is the Greensboro 4, and this was in 1960 at the Woolworth counter. So we all know Woolworth very well. Was a segregated space for dining, and so this was the Woolworth, the Greensboro 4, doing the work of opening up the leisure spaces in order to be able to dine. And then you all might know this well because it's been in the news for the past few years, Willa and Charles Bruce, Bruce Beach. So this was a beach, a piece of property that they purchased in LA and in the 20s, specifically for Black leisure, right? Because we had to be segregated. And the land was taken back, right? Illegally seized. And the land just went back to the family. So, you know, again, thinking about what drives our leisure work, right? Here are Black people trying to create safe spaces for themselves. The land was seized. So another kind of iconic thing that drives our work. Things that we know, you know, very well, that there were Black people wanting to see their own artists perform and had to sit in the nosebleeds, had to sit in spaces that weren't safe, weren't clean, to see their own artists perform, right? And so colored sections in theaters. And so when we think about this work, how do the remnants of these kinds of things remain, and what do they look like remain in spaces of entertainment, in spaces of the outdoors, in spaces of dining? And you know, spaces of hospitality, you all might know very well, the Green Book, book created for African American safety while traveling, while on the road. Where is it safe to stay? And so we see here a protest in Atlanta about, you know, having safe spaces for African Americans to rest their head. And it's, you know, just very interesting that this is a photo from Atlanta. And, you know, we think about Atlanta now as this safe haven for African Americans, and also just a space where African Americans are thriving, right? But this was the start. And last, you know, ending on our, you know, our campgrounds, you know, our outdoor spaces, which I, you know, referred to before, you know, separate and very much unequal, right? So Black people having the gumption and you know, going through kind of the fears of being in these spaces, but then once you're there, you do not have a space that is physically safe or has accommodations. So what we know, right, is that we have amendments, we have acts, we have rights, right? So we know that the 13th Amendment ended enslavement, and we know that the Civil Rights Act ended segregation, right? Voting Rights Act, Fair Housing Act. But what we know for sure, right, is that just because we get a right doesn't mean that our behavior begins to change. Anyone who's had a habit, right, for a year, 10 years, knows that thinking is hard to undo, right? So when you've had 400 years of thinking of suppression, of thinking of oppression and enacting in that way in these public spaces, right? It is going to be hard to undo, right? Just with an act. The behavior, from going to no at the Woolworth counter to yes, you can finally sit here, is not as easy as the Civil Rights Act, right? And I think we leaned a lot on these acts to say, up, now we're fine, right? But one of my favorite quotes, when these places excluded people of color by law or practice, the implications resonate culturally, politically, and personally long after desegregation in the legal sense has taken place, right? So again, if we're talking about 400 years of habits, right? 400 years of thinking that we need to undo, it doesn't happen, right, in the flick of a switch. So what remains? So as we think about the things that remain, and why Black people are reporting numbers of like 1 in 2, feeling that they were unsafe or unwelcome in a space, taking all of that history and placing it in the now, what does it look like now, and why are we seeing these reports from African Americans feeling unsafe or unwelcome in the space? So what remains, some of them in our leisure spaces, are tableside racism, Black people experiencing racism in restaurants and what that looks like, being served differently, being seated differently, being treated differently, right? So allowed to sit at the counter now and hold that space, but still elements remain, right? Shopping while Black. You can probably ask a Black person that you know, and I'm sure Black folks on this call have experiences in shopping spaces where they felt followed, where they felt that they didn't get a welcome greeting, right? That they just didn't feel certain that this was the space for them. These are the things that remain. The weaponization of rest for African Americans, so much so that Tricia Hersey, who's called the Nat Bishop, had to create she created an entire chart of work about how rest is revolutionary for African Americans because it was so denied and weaponized. The idea that Black folks are lazy when they rest is something that Black people carry with them, so much so that they will work and work and work and work, right? In order to, kind of oust the thinking that we are given that Black folks are carrying those kinds of monikers about, being lazy, et cetera. So weaponizing rest and being denied rest. The invisible velvet rope, this is something that we coined ourselves because, that rope that was literal during segregation, where you would have, a rope, a string in the middle of a concert, Black folks on one side, white folks on another. It's invisible now. So Black folks feeling uncomfortable at the opera, feeling out of place in symphonies and in museums, right? These are the things that remain. And of course, things that you know well, the nature gap and the adventure gap. Nature gap being, of course, that Black and brown people do not have easy access to as much nature, right? Green space, clean water, clean air, et cetera. And then the adventure gap, which comes from a history of us being, quite frankly, afraid to be in these spaces. And when you talk about the adventure gap, especially of swimming, we know that is tied directly to segregation, especially underscored by the CDC, that because pools were segregated and then shut down and then not taken care of because those Black communities were not given the funds, we did not have water access. So we know that that reverberates now to more Black children dying by drowning in the summer than any other group. And that is directly tied to that adventure gap. We did not have those opportunities for swimming lessons and water safety, right? So all of these things come to the fore in the now. And that is the work that Sojourn Noir is doing. I'm very excited to have these conversations with York County. Explore York has been supportive in making sure that we can make this work happen. And I'm just excited to bring these conversations and the co-marketing strategies and all of the other amazing things that we have to offer to ensure that African American tourists feel seen, heard, and safe in York County and beyond. And please follow us as we go through this journey in York County. And if you're interested in hosting similar conversations, please connect with us.
Well, thank you so much to both of our speakers.